The Carlton Hotel terrace buzzed with the mechanical whir of camera motors. Afternoon sunlight slanted across white tablecloths and champagne flutes. The crozet stretched below, palm trees motionless in the Mediterranean heat. Brigitte Bardot emerged from the hotel's revolving doors at precisely 2:47 p.m. Her publicist walked 3 steps behind, clutching a leather folder. 2 festival security guards flanked them, their radios crackling with static updates. The terrace erupted. Photographers surged forward like a wave breaking against rocks. Flashbulbs popped in rapid succession, creating a strobe effect across her face. She wore a simple white cotton dress and oversized sunglasses. Her hair fell in loose waves past her shoulders. No jewelry, except thin gold bangles that caught the light as she moved. The press conference table sat positioned near the terrace's edge. A cluster of microphones sprouted from its center, like mechanical flowers. Name placards marked assigned seating for major publications. Festival director Maurice Bessy approached with measured steps. His tie showed sweat stains, despite the sea breeze. He whispered something in her ear that made her jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. She took her designated seat. The chair scraped against stone flooring. Photographers immediately dropped to their knees, angling for better shots through the forest of microphones. Mademoiselle Bardot, regarding your new film. The first question came before she had fully settled. A German journalist with thick-rimmed glasses leaned forward aggressively. His tape recorder lay inches from her hand. Camera shutters clicked like insects. The sound never stopped, creating a constant percussion underneath every word. Some photographers changed lenses without pausing their shooting. She answered in measured tones about Don Juan and Roger Vadim's direction. Her voice remained steady, despite the chaos surrounding her. The microphones amplified every breath, every pause. "What about your relationship with Gunter Sachs?" called out a British tabloid reporter. He stood behind the seated journalists, notebook ready. His question cut through her previous answer about cinematic technique. Flash bulbs fired directly into her face. She blinked rapidly, but maintained eye contact with the questioner. Her publicist shifted uncomfortably in his peripheral chair. "I'm here to discuss the film," she replied. Her accent carried clearly through the speakers. Several photographers moved closer, their telephoto lenses now just feet from the table. The festival director checked his watch. He had scheduled this event for exactly 30 minutes. The next press conference for a competing film was already setting up on the lower terrace. "But surely your personal life influences your choice of roles." The same British reporter persisted. He stepped closer to the table, forcing security to intervene with subtle gestures. Other journalists sensed blood in the water. A French photographer crawled between table legs to capture an upward angle. His knee knocked against a microphone stand, sending feedback through the speakers. The screech made everyone wince except him. She removed her sunglasses and placed them on the table. The gesture exposed her eyes to the relentless camera fire. Photographers immediately zoomed in on her unguarded expression. "The character of Don Juan represents freedom," she began, attempting to redirect the conversation. Her hands remained folded on the white tablecloth. Sweat beaded at her hairline, despite the afternoon breeze. "Freedom like your own lifestyle?" Another voice from the crowd. This one belonged to an Italian gossip magazine correspondent. He wore a rumpled suit and held a small camera above his head. The security guards exchanged glances. The crowd had grown larger than expected. Hotel guests peered down from upper balconies, adding to the sense of being observed from all angles. She drank from a water glass that someone had placed before her. The liquid caught the light as she tilted her head back. Cameras captured the movement from multiple angles simultaneously. "Your recent statements about marriage," began a new questioner. This was a woman from Paris Match, her pencil poised above a spiral notebook. The question hung in the air like cigarette smoke. Before Bardot could respond, 3 more hands shot up. Voices began overlapping, creating a cacophony of demands for attention. The festival director looked increasingly agitated. A Spanish photographer dropped to his belly, sliding across the terrace stones to get beneath the table. His camera clicked steadily as he shot upward through the glass tabletop. Security moved to intercept him. "One at a time, please," she said, into the microphones. But her voice was nearly lost in the growing chaos. More photographers had arrived, drawn by the commotion from the hotel lobby. The festival director tapped his watch face and whispered to an assistant. The next event was already running late. Important distributors were waiting in the hotel's conference rooms for scheduled meetings. But surely the public deserves to know. The British tabloid reporter had somehow moved closer to the front. His notebook was now practically resting on the table's edge. Camera motor drives whirred constantly. Some photographers shot entire rolls without pausing, their motor drives creating a mechanical heartbeat beneath the proceedings. Empty film canisters littered the terrace floor. "Your relationship with Roger Vadim seems complicated." This came from a French entertainment reporter who had been quiet until now. Her question was delivered in a knowing tone that suggested insider information. The publicist half rose from his chair, ready to intervene. But Bardot raised a slight hand to stop him. The gesture was captured by multiple cameras, creating yet another moment of unintended performance. Camera lenses pressed closer to the table's surface. Some photographers were now shooting from positions that would have been considered inappropriate at a normal press conference. The usual boundaries had eroded completely. She shifted in her chair, the cotton dress rustling against leather upholstery. Even this minor movement triggered a fresh burst of camera activity. Every gesture had become newsworthy by virtue of being observed. "Could you speak louder, please?" called someone from the back rows. But the request was immediately contradicted by photographers needing her to remain still for their shots. The competing demands created an impossible situation. "Is there a new man in your life?" The question came from multiple directions simultaneously. Different journalists had asked essentially the same thing, creating an echo effect through the microphones. Her jaw muscles tightened visibly. The tension showed in the line of her neck and the set of her shoulders. Photographers immediately focused on capturing this change in her demeanor. The publicist consulted his own watch and made eye contact with the festival director. Silent communication passed between them about timing and next steps. Both men looked increasingly concerned. Camera equipment cases and tripods now cluttered the terrace floor. Late arriving photographers had to navigate an obstacle course of gear to reach shooting positions. Several small collisions occurred as people maneuvered. "Your thoughts on women's liberation?" This question came from a serious female journalist who had been taking notes rather than photographs. Her inquiry cut through the personal gossip with unexpected gravity. But before Bardot could respond, someone else shouted a question about her tax situation. The topics were becoming more invasive and scattered. Professional film questions had been abandoned entirely. She reached for her sunglasses on the table. The movement was defensive, protective, but photographers treated it as another photo opportunity, their shutters clicking as her hand moved across the white cloth. A camera flash fired directly beside her ear, close enough that she could feel the heat from the bulb. The photographer had somehow gotten within arm's reach of her chair. Security was slow to react to his position. "The rumors about your retirement," began yet another question, but it was interrupted by someone else asking about her mother's health. The intersection of inquiries created audio chaos through the microphone system. Her breathing had become slightly more rapid. The change was subtle but visible to the closest photographers. Several began focusing on tighter shots of her face and neck area. The festival director stood up from his peripheral position. His movement was meant as a signal that the conference should conclude, but the journalists ignored his cue entirely, pressing forward with more questions. "Your ex-husband, Jacques Charrier." The mention of his name triggered an immediate response. Her posture stiffened, and her eyes flashed. Cameras captured the reaction before she could control it. A photographer's zoom lens actually knocked over a microphone stand. The crash created feedback through the sound system, causing everyone to cover their ears. But shooting continued even during the technical disruption. She looked toward her publicist, who was already gathering his papers. His intention to end the conference was clear, but journalists sensed the approaching conclusion and accelerated their questioning pace. Just one more question about your personal life. The plea came from at least 4 different voices. Each journalist believed their inquiry deserved final consideration. None showed any inclination to yield to others. The security guards moved closer to the table. Their positioning suggested they were prepared to intervene physically if necessary. Radio communication with hotel management had become more frequent and urgent. Flash photography continued at machine gun pace. Some cameramen had clearly exceeded reasonable limits, but showed no signs of stopping. The aggressive behavior was feeding on itself, creating escalation. She placed both hands flat on the table surface. The gesture looked like preparation for standing up. Photographers immediately began shooting rapid sequences, anticipating movement. "I think that's enough questions about my private life," she said into the microphones. Her voice carried a warning tone that hadn't been present earlier. The crowd noise dimmed slightly as journalists recognized the shift. But immediately, another hand shot up, with what was obviously going to be another personal question. The reporter's face showed determination to get his inquiry on record. Others seemed to be preparing similar follow-ups. The festival director made an urgent gesture to his assistant, who began approaching the table. The official conclusion was clearly imminent, but this only seemed to make the journalists more desperate for final shots and questions. Camera lenses pressed even closer to the table edge. Some photographers were now shooting from positions that invaded her personal space completely. The professional distance had evaporated entirely. Her right hand moved toward the nearest microphone. The gesture was slow and deliberate. Every camera in the crowd focused on the movement, creating a moment of intense concentration. "I said that's enough," she repeated, her voice rising slightly. The microphones amplified her words across the terrace. Several photographers immediately began shooting rapid sequences of her speaking, but another journalist ignored her statement completely, launching into a question about her romantic history. His persistence was aggressive and unprofessional. Other reporters seemed to take his behavior as permission for their own invasive inquiries. The mechanical clicking of camera shutters reached a crescendo. Photographers were shooting continuously now, using motor drives at maximum speed. The sound created an almost violent rhythm against the afternoon air. She looked directly at the microphone in front of her, her gaze fixed on it as if it had become the symbol of everything wrong with the situation. Her breathing was clearly elevated now. Flashbulbs fired in rapid succession, creating a strobe effect that made normal vision difficult. The light show had become disorienting and aggressive. Hotel guests on upper balconies began pointing and staring at the spectacle. "One final question about your future plans," began another journalist. But his words were cut off as she suddenly reached forward with both hands. The microphone hit the table surface with a metallic clang that echoed through the speakers. The sound system fed back briefly before technicians could adjust levels. Photographers captured the motion from every possible angle. "Enough," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the now quiet terrace. The word came out in French, sharp and final. Every camera in the crowd clicked simultaneously, preserving the moment. She stood up from her chair with quick, decisive movement. The cotton dress rustled as she rose. Photographers immediately began shooting sequences of her standing, their motor drives whirring at maximum speed. The festival director moved quickly toward the table, his assistant close behind. But their intervention was no longer necessary. The confrontation had already reached its inevitable conclusion. Camera flashes continued firing, even as she turned away from the table. Photographers followed her movement, shooting rapidly as she walked toward the hotel entrance. The pursuit continued until security intervened.